Ever wondered how an underdog army, outnumbered and far from home, could achieve one of the most stunning victories in military history? Today, we're diving deep into the year 216 BC, to the dusty plains of Apulia in southern Italy. This is the story of the Battle of Cannae, a name that has echoed through millennia as the ultimate example of tactical genius. It's the story of Hannibal Barca and his masterful destruction of a massive Roman army. By 216 BC, the Second Punic War had been raging for 2 years. Hannibal, the brilliant Carthaginian general, had invaded Italy, crossing the Alps with his elephants in a legendary feat of endurance. He had already defeated the Romans twice, at the battles of Trebia and Lake Trasimene. Rome was panicked, wounded, but far from broken. The Romans were masters of warfare, known for their discipline, relentless legions, and seemingly inexhaustible manpower. They decided to put an end to Hannibal once and for all. The Roman Senate, tired of the cautious tactics of Quintus Fabius Maximus, who was known as the Delayer, appointed two new consuls, Caius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus. They were given command of the largest army Rome had ever assembled. We're talking about a colossal force. Historical estimates vary, but most sources agree it was somewhere between 80,000 and 87,000 men. 8 full legions, plus an equal number of allied troops. To put that into perspective, a standard Roman consular army was usually 4 legions. This was double that. It was an army designed not just to fight, but to crush. Varro, the more aggressive of the 2 consuls, was eager for a decisive battle. He believed that Rome's sheer numerical superiority would overwhelm Hannibal's smaller, more diverse force. Paulus was more cautious, aware of Hannibal's cunning, but Roman tradition dictated that the consuls alternated command daily. On the day of the battle, it was Varro's turn. Facing this Roman behemoth was Hannibal's army. He had about 50,000 soldiers, 40,000 infantry, and 10,000 cavalry. His force was a mosaic of different cultures, hardened Carthaginian veterans, fierce Spanish warriors, Gallic tribesmen who had joined him in northern Italy, and his elite Numidian light cavalry. They were outnumbered, fighting on enemy soil, with their supply lines stretched thin. On paper, it looked like an impossible fight for Carthage. But Hannibal had a plan. He wasn't just a general, he was a master psychologist and a brilliant strategist. The battlefield was a wide, flat plain near the Aufidus River, near the town of Cannae, which Hannibal had captured to secure his supplies. The open terrain was perfect for cavalry, a fact Hannibal intended to exploit. Varro, seeing the flat ground, saw an opportunity to deploy his massive infantry force in a deep, powerful formation that could simply punch through the enemy line. He believed in brute force. Hannibal believed in finesse. On the morning of August 2nd to 16 BC, the 2 armies drew up for battle. The Romans positioned their infantry in the center, but in an unusually deep and narrow formation. They were packed together, shoulder to shoulder, designed to act as a human battering ram. Their Roman cavalry was placed on their right wing, by the river, and their allied cavalry on the left. Their plan was simple: smash through the Carthaginian center and win the day. Hannibal's deployment was a work of art, a trap in plain sight. He also placed his infantry in the center, but in a completely different way. He put his least reliable troops, the Gauls and Spaniards, at the very front and center. But he ranged them in a thin, crescent shape that bulged outwards, towards the Romans. It looked like a weak, extended line, almost inviting the Roman attack. On his flanks, hidden behind the crescent, he placed his best troops, his veteran African infantry, armed with captured Roman weapons and armor. These were his hammers. And then there was his cavalry, his decisive advantage. On his left wing, facing the Roman cavalry, he placed his heavy Spanish and Gallic horsemen under the command of his brother, Hasdrubal. On his right wing, he positioned his superb Numidian light cavalry, led by Hannibal, to face the Roman allied horse. The entire formation was designed to do one thing: bend, but not break, and then envelop the enemy. As the battle began, the Roman legions surged forward, just as Hannibal had predicted. The sheer weight of their numbers pressed hard against the weak Carthaginian center. The crescent of Gauls and Spaniards began to give way, slowly and deliberately. From the Roman perspective, it must have looked like victory was at hand. They were pushing the enemy back. Their center was collapsing. They poured more and more soldiers into the gap, pressing their advantage, driven by the desire to break through. But this was the genius of Hannibal's plan. The crescent wasn't breaking, it was bending inward. As the Roman infantry pushed deeper and deeper, the Carthaginian line inverted, from a convex crescent to a concave U-shape. The Romans, so focused on the collapsing center, were unwittingly marching into a trap, their own flanks becoming dangerously exposed. While the infantry drama unfolded in the center, the battle on the wings was swift and brutal. On Hannibal's left, Hasdrubal's heavy cavalry smashed into the weaker Roman cavalry and shattered them. Instead of pursuing the fleeing Romans, Hasdrubal showed incredible discipline. He wheeled his entire force around the back of the Roman army to attack the light cavalry on the other wing from behind. Caught between Hasdrubal's heavy horse and the Numidian cavalry, the Roman left wing disintegrated. Now, the trap was ready to spring. The Roman legions were packed tightly into the center, surging forward into the pocket created by Hannibal's yielding infantry. They had lost all cohesion and were now just a dense, disorganized mass of men, unable to fight effectively. At that precise moment, Hannibal gave the signal. His veteran African infantry, who had been held in reserve on the flanks, turned inward and slammed into the exposed sides of the Roman legions. Suddenly, the Romans were being attacked not just from the front, but from both sides. Then, Hasdrubal, having finished with the enemy cavalry, completed the encirclement by charging into the Roman rear. The mighty Roman army was completely surrounded, trapped. The result was not a battle anymore, it was a slaughter. Packed so tightly they could barely lift their arms to swing a sword, the Roman soldiers were systematically cut down. There was no escape. The discipline that made the legions so formidable now worked against them, as they were unable to break formation and flee. The consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus fought bravely until he was killed. Varro, the architect of the disaster, managed to escape with a handful of men. By the end of the day, the plain was a horrifying scene of carnage. Out of an army of over 80,000, it's estimated that between 50,000 and 70,000 Romans were killed or captured. Hannibal lost only around 6,000 men. It was a devastating blow to Rome, a demographic catastrophe that shook the Republic to its core. One of the greatest military powers in the ancient world had been brought to its knees by a smaller, seemingly inferior force. Cannae is studied in military academies to this day as the perfect example of a double envelopment, a pincer movement. Hannibal used his knowledge of his own army's strengths and weaknesses, his opponent's psychology, and the terrain to create a tactical masterpiece. He turned his numerical disadvantage into an advantage, luring the Romans into a killing zone of his own design. Despite this incredible victory, Hannibal ultimately lost the war. Rome's resilience was astonishing. They refused to surrender, raised new armies, and eventually took the fight to Carthage itself, forcing Hannibal to leave Italy. But the Battle of Cannae remains his crowning achievement, a testament to the idea that superior strategy can triumph over superior numbers. It's a powerful reminder that in any conflict, the most powerful weapon is the mind. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey back in time as fascinating as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's most epic battles. See you next time.